Today, we're going to be going over narrative structure and reviewing elements on the plot diagram chart. The definition of narrative structure can also be defined as a plot in the story. So essentially what's going to happen is this is going to be your beginning, this is going to be your middle, and this is going to be your end. So whenever we're thinking about stories, we're thinking about narratives and how they're told. So this is going to help us analyze literature, not only books, short stories, but also movies and music that we look at to see how a character changes, common themes, and different narrative techniques used. For our purposes, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the character's point of view and how they react to these events in a narrative structure diagram. So this is a plot diagram for you right here. We're going to be reviewing all the elements on here for this video, and we're going to start off right here at the exposition. And the exposition is essentially the beginning of the story. So this is where the characters and setting are introduced, and this is where we meet our main characters too. At some point in the exposition, the conflict is introduced also. So when we do get to rising actions leading to our climax, we have some sort of idea of the issues between the characters. For this video, we're going to be using The Lion King as an example. And the exposition of The Lion King is we're introduced to the idea of Pride Rock, Mufasa, Simba, the main characters, and the conflict these characters have with Scar. Moving up the plot diagram, we now have the rising action in between the exposition and our next element, climax, right here. So the rising action is one of the major points of a plot or storyline. Rising actions occur after the exposition and before the climax. So the rising action exists to gain the reader's interest and develop conflict between the characters before the climax. So these are going to be events and issues in the narrative where it's going to build up to this great tipping point. So another example again is The Lion King. So rising actions in The Lion King, we have the development of the conflict between Scar and Simba. We have Scar's plot to kill Mufasa, Simba's guilt, and then exile, and Scar's reign as king. Climax of the story, the tipping point of the plot diagram and any narrative story is right up here. So the climax is going to be defined as the central conflict and where it reaches its highest point of intensity. So when we're thinking of The Lion King, we're thinking of that great fight that Simba and Scar have over their battle for Pride Rock. So the climax is going to be the emotional intensity in the moment where the most action happens in the story and where it really turns towards a conclusion. So after the climax, now we're looking at the falling action of the story. And the falling action follows the climax and is the exact opposite of rising action. So instead of a series of events that increase in intensity, the falling action is a series of events that follow the biggest conflict, the climax, and shows the fallout of those events, whether that's good or bad. In general, falling action demonstrates the consequences of the climax and allows and follows that part of the story and depicts the way those choices affect characters going forward. So, really, we learn about what happens to the characters after the climax and what happens as a result of their choices in the climax. And finally, we have our resolution. So, the resolution is going to be the ending of the story, it's going to be the conclusion, it's going to wrap and tie all the pieces together. All the conflicts are resolved, and it is a solution to the central conflict that's introduced in the exposition of the story. Well, not all resolutions are uplifting. They don't not necessarily upbeat or happy. they do tend to add some kind of closure for a reader, so we're not left in a cliffhanger. So the example when we're looking at The Lion King, Simba is now king of Pride Rock, and he gets a princess, Nala. So that is how The Lion King follows the narrative structure of a story, and these are the terms you're going to need to use for a plot diagram.